It is Sunday. We're almost nearing the end of October 2024. I hope you're having a great day thus far. Whether you're eating your breakfast, having a cup of coffee, doing the leisurely thing most of us do on Sunday, and that is to enjoy and to rest a little bit as you watch me and contemplate killing yourself. No, I'm kidding. It was a joke. Bad joke, but whatever. I bring out a lot, folks. Good, bad, not very much in the middle or indifferent. And anyway, a lot of people ask me uh, my fondness for the news anchors. Not so much today, because there's not many. There's a few that I really like. I grew up in the 70s, and I watched royalty. I watched people like Van Amberg and Dave McElhatton and George Redding and Pete Wilson. And Pete stayed longer, but I remember those kind of anchors. So I'm a little spoiled, and I know many of you watching know and can identify with my fondness for these people. Evan White, there's another one. Bob Jimenez, people like that. And the reporters were generally solid too. It was a different era, and I lament the fact that there's not many around. I mean, you can look at somebody like, Juliet Goodrich. I think is very solid. I very much like Dan Ashley. He's a little stuffy at times. Liz Cook has improved greatly over at Pix, CBS News Bay Area, but there was nothing like, really nothing like Van Amberg and Jerry Jensen. And of course, I'm talking about the heyday, the sort of embryonic start of what they called Happy Talk. Now, Happy Talk was an industry term for a newscast that was very much sort of, they had a phrase too. If it bleeds, it leads. It was sensationalistic, but it was also as per Happy Talk, they would talk about unusual stories. They usually would end the newscast with something that they clipped off of a local wire service or national wire service. Pete Wilson referred to it as the circular file, that he would read at the end of a newscast. Jerry Jensen usually ended KGO news scene, as they called it in those days. It was kind of corny, of course. Were there sensationalistic stories? Yeah, as befitting the time, the era that we were all in. But back to my central focus here. What made Van Amberg so great was, his nuances. He was, after all, the top banana at Channel 7, at least in my lifetime. And not only looked the part, acted the part, did the part. I mean, remember this? He'd hold the pen, and it wasn't just a prop. He really did hold the pen. And I remember him so many of those crazy stories in the 70s, like the Zebra Killers, like Patty Hearst, the kidnapping, and all the SLA and that was Patty Hearst, and the killings of Merritt Moscone, Harvey Milk. Of course, you had the situation with regards to, it just seems like a story every day. Oh yeah, Guyana and Jim Jones. I very much remember distinctively the Monday night when they were getting images from Jonestown. Remember, this was pre-microwave days. You didn't have the instantaneous video. We had images, but we really didn't see that until the Monday after. That took place on the, the pre-Thanksgiving of actually, it was before that, November 20th, 1978. My God, it's scary how time flies. But anyway, but Van Amberg and Marcia Brandman. I didn't mention Marcia Brandman was terrific. And by the way, obviously, not so obvious. Some of you may or may not know Van passed away about 8 years ago. Uh, Pete Wilson, my God, has it been July of 2007? So that's almost what, 17 years ago, over 17 years ago. Jerry Jensen also passed back in 1984. And, I loved those days. I was a kid, but I loved watching news. I was, uh, I even remember watching Watergate. Remember the Watergate hearings and all that stuff. I had no life, basically. Um, but I enjoyed that part of growing up in the Bay Area and watching what I consider real news anchors. I mentioned Van with the pen and Van with his, prosecutorial type of interviewing technique. And, look, he became an icon and he had his own staff, he had his own people, and he was good. And I could care less if he had an ego. Well, look, we all have egos. You should have an ego if you're working in the news business. Van was very powerful. He was an SOB if you damn near screwed up, which, you know, demanding. He was. I didn't know the man that well. It was one interview that I worked my what off to try to get. He was very private. He did an interview. It was kind of a cross interview with him and Dave McElhatton, who was just a gem of a man. I did get to meet Dave McElhatton. And not only was he a great anchor, very, very Cronkite-ish kind of tendencies, a genuine person, worked from radio into, usually it's the other way around. He was at KCBS in the darling years of KCBS and then went over to Pix and started out awkward and then became like Van Amber. They were titans. They were just awesome. And, what made them so good is they didn't have to look down at notes. They made notes, but the way they conducted themselves, how they not only read the news, the back and forth with reporters, the fact that you truly talk about trust, you did trust them. Van had a great staff, people working beside him. KGO News was at its apex news scene. Remember that commercial, folks? I know some of you do. If you don't, you can go on YouTube and just type in KGO commercials where they're all on a horse and they're marching around and they were talking about news. Just so 70s. Van Amberg was terrific. I loved the way he read. He had conversational style. A lot of it was not just off the teleprompter. He conversed. He cared. He was interested. He was passionate. Not to say that you had to be all those things while reading the news, but that's what made Van Amberg so terrific. Likewise, others. But Van was a machine all by himself. He had a distinctive style. And, people ask me, well, could he exist in an era like today? Oh, I think so. Absolutely. Because after all, we're a people type of culture, particularly when it comes to news. That's why people talk about, the anchors who identify with the most of us. We want passion. We want an identity. We want the fact to feel and to realize that these people are in our households, right? So trust becomes an element. That's why McElhatton was so fantastic. It wasn't phony. It wasn't disingenuous. He truly cared about what he was doing. He had that fatherly kind of appearance and demeanor. It was all from the heart, as I often attribute certain things, from the heart. So, of course, we identified with. Of course, we liked people like Dave McElhatton. Pete Wilson, not as, shall we say, friendly, but he was terrific. Gave more of a straight shooted kind of a news readership anchoring, but he got involved, as we all know. Today we don't have a lot of that, and I go back to KTVU real early on. in the 70s. We had people like, George Redding, if you can remember that, Marsha Brandwin. Marsha was terrific. And Marsha went from 2 over to KGO. She eventually left the Bay Area and, of course, had a heralded career at KTTV in Southern California, in LA. And she's alive today, out of the industry and working as a psychologist, believe it or not. Very, very cool that Marsha Brandwood, who I had contact with about 3 or 4 years ago on Facebook, and we went back and forth a few times, and it was interesting to talk to her and let her know that she was fantastic. Remember growing up, KTVU in the 70s, the old studios, 2 Jack London Square, or was it 1? I think it was 1 Jack London Square, the home of big time wrestling in Jack London Square. And you had Marsha Brandwin, and that was the very beginning of Dennis Richmond. But you had George Redding, we had Gary Park, who a lot of people don't remember did news before he did sports, and he became terrific at both. We had Gary Park. We had a lot of the people who had just fantastic careers. They were very fluid. They were very thorough. There was substance behind the style. Some not so much substantive, but they made you watch. You looked and you learned and you felt very comfortable. That's what I love about Channel 7. Of course, it was kind of corny. If it bleeds, it leads. They had all these crazy stories. Severed penis, remember that? On the railroad tracks. People like Pete Giddings, Jerry Jensen, John O'Reilly Sports. Channel 7 was the signature newscast. And Van Amberg and people like that were so compelling. And of course, yes, you did not have the internet back then. So yeah, a lot of people stuck to the channel. There was only 3 or 4 channels, but local news embodied by KGO TV, they were the king of the mountain, was Channel 7. So I just thought I'd go down a little memory lane here on a Sunday. Please, folks, if you like what you see and hear, please make a donation to my site. Click on my PayPal. That's what enables me to give you stories and opinions, hopefully a little bit of reflection like Sunday today, and of course, my takes and yes, scoops, which is why you come here. So please make a donation at the very least, or do both. Subscribe here to my YouTube channel and tell all your friends, your priests, your rabbis, your enemies that you watch Rich Lieberman. See you later.